Bishop And, I'm so glad to have you again, to have a sequel of our conversation from the one that we had last week about the story of your journey, especially as a missionary. So I'd like us to continue. And of course, before we proceed, I just want to welcome you again to the second part of our discussion.
Thank you, Apostle Chikanda. It's a privilege and an honor to be in your program and on your show one more time at the Transformed Life Radio. It's a privilege for me to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bishop, last week you brought up many things that, of course, in our previous informal conversations, I think I'd missed out on some things. But, it was so wonderful. I
Mm.
really enjoyed what you brought up. But I want us to go back to the time that you started out in Swaziland. That's, I think we are going back to the year 2000. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. Now, when we are now in the year 2000, so would you please take us through just some timelines in terms of the milestones the early milestones that you achieved, and when was that? And of course, if you are able to remember the people that played a role, both the members and ministry friends that played a part into. I'm just talking about at the beginning, maybe the first 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, if you can take us through.
Yeah. Thank you, Apostle. I think you are just making me to go back almost 3 decades back. And like you rightly said, I think that in the previous episode, we spoke about the prelims and the foundation and the beginnings of the whole concept of coming on missions. And I think we ended at when I arrived in Swaziland. So probably that's where I'll take up from.
All right.
So I was about 25 or 26 years when I landed in Manzini, um, Eswatini. And you asking for timelines regarding certain milestones or achievements. When you mentioned that, I started smiling. I don't know whether you saw me, but
Yes.
as I sit here, genuinely, I don't even think at that time there was anything of there is anything I could think of and point to and say this was or is an achievement. It's not like I'm being over humble, but honestly, for me, it was rather a season of struggles, a season of digging a trench. You know how it feels when you are building a foundation and you have to dig the trench and get it done and lay a solid foundation. And at that time, the missions office sent missionaries alone. I mean, like I said last week, I was the second missionary to be sent out, and I
Yes.
came alone. I wasn't married, and so, but I was just full of hope and faith and belief that God would accomplish something in Swaziland with me if I obey. I didn't really know exactly what God would do, but believe you me, I believed that I wasn't going to go back empty-handed, that I was going to fulfill something by the grace of God. Um, so obviously, I started by seeking the Lord's face. I think I did about a 21-day fast, seeking the Lord's face, praying and praying for the mission, praying for the country, praying for my life, praying for the future. Basically, that God's will be done, because those are the things that my father, Bishop Dag, had taught me, and also my missions director, Bishop Jake Godwell, at the time. And then I think after the 21-day fast, during that season, I used to fellowship with the Assemblies of God Church in Manzini because my host, that was my uncle, used to be a member of the church with his wife. So I used to fellowship with them and also to get to understand how church works and how Christianity functions and how the whole dynamics of ministry operates in Eswatini. So after seeking the Lord's face, I launched out into evangelism. I remember in those days I used to carry my Dick's Bible, quite a big Bible in those days, if you do remember the Dick's Bible.
Yeah.
And I'll carry it on the streets of Matsapa, and I'll be preaching to people one on one. I remember there was a day I got into this field and there were a group of young boys playing soccer. I entered into the football match and I held the ball. And when I held the ball, they all looked at me and I asked them to come. So they came closer and I dropped the ball and I began to minister to them, to preach to them. Out of that, I think I got about 3 or 4 converts from that interrupted football match. And I told them where my church was going to start. We hadn't started yet, but I'd found a place, I'd paid for it, and I was just waiting to launch out. I remember on that day, the first day that we started the church, I was there expecting all these young people to come. Some of them had even paid for their bus fares to come to church. But Apostle Chikanda, nobody came to church. I was the only person there, and I felt very discouraged. I felt I wasn't called. I felt I didn't hear well. But I felt so depressed. I felt like going back. I remember a week, within that week, I called Bishop Dag, and I told him my experience. And he encouraged me that many missions start like that, or many church branches start like that. And I should be encouraged. The church is going to work. But I kept praying. I kept now moving from Atapa. I would come to town. At that time, I was still job hunting, and I had quite a lot of time uh, at my disposal. So I would drop in applications because our concept for missionaries then is to go and be self-supporting.
Mm.
So I was still looking for jobs, and I'll write applications and drop them into many places. And after that, I'll pick up my Bible and I'll hit town and I'll preach to people. I remember the post office square, if you know, the post office.
Mm-hmm.
There is a park. I think at the time it was called Freedom Park or something. Yeah. So I
Yes.
would stand. There were so many people that would either sit on the pavement or be on the park relaxing, and some people would use the post office as a meeting point for people for their meet. So I found people there, and I always preach to them and get them saved and invite them to church. Now, one day, probably still in the year 2000, because I remember I hadn't started my secular work then. Um, One day I found a young man that was standing there waiting for somebody, and he looked very familiar. And I realized I didn't know him, but he also looked at me. You know what was happening?
Yeah.
I didn't know him, but he looked Ghanaian to me, but I couldn't connect how a Ghanaian could be here. So he approached me and spoke in the Ghanaian language and said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm fine." Then we started to talk, and he said, "I just arrived in Swaziland, and he was also looking for a job." So he became my friend. I invited him to church, and he joined our church. At that time, just a few people, probably about 7, 8, 9, 10 people. He joined the church.
Mm.
From that, a few other people started coming in, and then we moved the church from where it was right into Manzini town near the bus rank. And that's where, again, one day I had an email, and the email somebody, a lot of people in West Africa think that Swaziland is in South Africa or is
Yeah.
South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this gentleman has sent me an email saying he's coming to Cape Town, or he's on his way to Cape Town, but he's coming to Swaziland, and his pastor, he was from a branch in Ghana.
Mm.
His pastor had given him my email address. So anyway, so I arranged to meet this gentleman, and I realized that um, he had some friends that were also coming. So I got hold of this gentleman and his friends. They all came. These were very spirit-filled gentlemen, full of fire. One was called David, one was called Jonathan, the brother. The other guy
Mm.
was called Francis. And then they had another friend, Michael, and the fifth one was also Michael. There were two Michaels. And
Mm.
so there were five young men who had finished college. They were
Yeah.
they wanted to like explore the world and look
Mm-hmm.
for for greener pastures.
Junior pastors.
So I helped them to settle, I helped them to find jobs, and they were of great help to the church. At that time, we were probably just about 3 to 4 months old as a church. And I remember they used to live in Babani, but they would come like twice a week to Manzini. We would do outreaches, we would pray in the church, we would evangelize, invite people. And the guys really helped me. They really helped me. In fact, in terms of encouragement, I mean, to have a team to work with,
Yeah.
you know, it was quite encouraging. Even though they lived in Babani, they would come to Manzini on their own and come pray on Saturdays, do outreach. They would go back Sunday. They would come to church. Because at that time, I used to lead prayer myself, praise and worship myself, usher the people myself, preach myself, do the announcement myself. I was doing everything by myself. But these guys came and they helped me. They really helped me. Now, my uncle and my auntie were elders in the Assemblies of God Church. And they didn't, of course, they continued with their service, but they had a son, a young boy who at the time was about 9 years. So they gave me their son to also help in the church. And this young boy was gifted in music. So he had a little keyboard, just a small keyboard like that. And he brought it to church. And it also added a lot of vibe and good atmosphere to the church. People at the time, it was like we're playing, but actually we're doing serious church. For me, this was serious church.
Yeah.
And on the weekdays, I would preach in the schools. I remember my uncle used to teach at Swazi National High School. He would arrange for me to go and preach at the Scripture Union and also preach at the morning assembly. I got to meet the principal of the school, who was also a Christian, and she would ask him to come and preach to the students and the teachers alike. But none of those things really added on to the church until January 2020 to January 2001
Mm-hmm.
when I got a job in a place called Mikozini, close to Love, on your way
Mm-hmm.
to Togolago.
Yeah.
So I got employed there as a math and science teacher. I used to teach mathematics in the lower forms and biology and chemistry in the O-level class. And I used to stay there. At that time. I got a house in the school, so I live there. That I would come to town and do ministry because we're just probably about less than 30 kilometers away from town. So I'll jump into a bus and come and do ministry because that was why I came. My
Yeah.
ministry was why I left Ghana to come.
Yeah.
Teaching was just a way to support myself. So after school, I'll jump into a bus and come and preach and witness and go back, and go back the same day. Sometimes I use the opportunity to also do shopping in town. At that time, the main shop in town was ShopRite. All these other Pick and Pays were not really available. It was just ShopRite.
All
And there
right.
was Spar down there at the hub.
Mm.
But everybody used ShopRite because once you get out from the bus rank, you just go across
Yeah.
to the Bono Mall. So I'll do my shopping and go back to my small town or village. So this was how it was until that same year, 2021. I went to Ghana.
2001. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sorry, 2001. Sorry.
Yes.
I went to Ghana and I went to visit my friend that um, I used to interact with when I was in the university. He was Joseph I,
Mm.
and he was very much attracted to the ministry of Bishop Dag. He wasn't part of the church, but he was very much attracted to Bishop Dag's ministry as a lighthouse. And he was a very ministry-minded person. So I remember traveling to Kumasi, about a 4-hour journey out of Accra to go and look for him. And when I found him, I invited him to come to the missions to help me. He should leave whatever he was doing and come. So he prepared himself. And I think within 6 months, he bought a ticket and flew to Eswatini to come and be with me. At that time, I was just preparing to get married. I was still not married. This was in the year 2000. He came in February and I was preparing to get married in April. So when he came, of course, he joined in the leadership of the church and very much actively, helped to strengthen my hand. At that time, I remember the church on a very good Sunday when, like we say, the power of God has moved greatly. We was like 30, but when he came, the church started to move from 30 to 40s to 50s to 60s and even to 70s, I remember. And then we had to move from where we were to a bigger hall. And in April that year, I left the church for him and I went to Ghana to marry. And I remember when I came back after 3 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks, came back with my wife in May, the church had moved from like 70 to like 90. A lot of that is when I actually saw practically the effect of having a good assistant,
Mhm.
in the ministry. Because until then, like I said, I was alone and I was just doing my best. But I'm just thinking about if I hadn't found any help then, I'm sure I would still be struggling by now. But when the gentleman came, today he's Reverend Joe, actually, the pastor that took over the Manzini church when I left.
Yeah.
Eswatini, yeah.
Wow.
And he assisted me tremendously. Now, whilst I was in the school teaching, I also decided to preach. I mean, I would preach anywhere I find human beings.
Yeah.
So I'll preach at morning assembly. I'll talk to the teachers in the staff room. I'll speak even to my principal. But my principal allowed me to preach at morning assembly. I share the word of God after school. I'll ask most of the young teachers to come to my house. I used to have a big house then alone. We would cook, eat, go and play volleyball as a young man. I was about 26 years then. Go and play volleyball, and I would invite them to church, but none of them ever listened to or ever followed Jumah to his church. I mean, it was like one of us, a colleague. I mean, we can't join your church. You're a foreigner. You're one of us. But God gave me favor before the students. And most of the students started to come to me with their issues, and I would help them. Sometimes just a little financial help that they need. Sometimes counseling here and there. Sometimes prayer here and there. And I would really, minister to these young people until one day I was in church when I saw a handful of them come on their own all the way from Louve area to
Yeah.
church. And then I realized that if I could give them a little help, I could get a bit more people. At that time, the concept of busing wasn't even there. But I would hire a kumbi and it would collect all these students from Louve area
Mhm.
and bus them to Manzini and take, in the mornings. I remember probably at the time, we would be about 40 people in the service. But when these students come, when they join in, the whole church will be full because they'll come, you know, in drones. And that's how we established our first real choir. We use the students. So I would ask Reverend Joe at the time, he was also job hunting. And sometimes we would ask them to stay after school and we'll have choir practice with them for Sunday. And by the grace of God, some of those people are still in the church after 26 years. Some of them are pastors in the church. Some of them are pastors' wives in the church. This is how far we have come from, and how much God, blessed the work through these young people. They were obedient. They were prepared to learn. I remember the same year, Bishop Dark had come to Pretoria for a camp, and we needed to go. By that time, my resident permit was not in place, so I couldn't travel out of the country. I was still waiting for it to come out. These young people organized themselves, and they went all the way, not even to
Wow.
Pretoria. It was way out of Pretoria.
Mm.
We somewhere in Zambezi, a place called I've forgotten, Rhombus or something. Yeah, quite far. I've been there a few times. They found themselves there to represent Eswatini at the camp, and it was quite encouraging. So these were some of the people that I believe God used to help to take off, into what the mission has become. So this was like the first 2 years of the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is very, very interesting. And now I just want to, of course, as we build up on this story, to find out like, do you remember any ministry friends or acquaintances or any elderly ministers maybe fathers of the land, like we call them, in the ministry, who
Mm.
who received you or who helped you at that particular time?
Yeah. That's very important. Very, 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 very important. At that time, my focus was on like building my ministry. And as part of our training, we had also been taught to concentrate. When you get on the mission, concentrate. And we are not encouraged to join so many associations of the land and align yourself because you know how there is politics everywhere, including the
Mm,
church and the kingdom. So I wasn't so much into that. But as time would have it, when the church was probably just about 2 years, I remember just before I got married, I got um, I got I met a gentleman, also a Ghanaian. I met him one day when I had just jumped out from my bus from the school. And just when I got to Manzini, I met him at the post office. At that time, the post office was the major place for internet businesses. Like if you want to check your emails, you go there. Those were
mm,
the few places that had computers with internet connections on them. So most of us foreigners would go there and use their computer. So if you needed to meet somebody, just stand there for a few hours and you are likely the person is going to come in.
yeah,
So anyway, so I jump into my bus and walk to the post office to go and check my emails. At that time, cell phones were there, but they were very rare, the year
mhm,
2001. So I met this gentleman and he tells me, "Well, Pastor, I've been looking for you." I said, "Me? For what?" I mean, this is like a senior person. I remember he had a college that used to in those days, Swaziland used to have a lot of private colleges teaching a course called A80 level one, level two, level three. I mean, you are into the
yeah,
accounting thing. So he had a school like that he was running in Simunye. And I come to Mountain and said he was looking for me. And I said, "Wow, me, what's the problem?" That he said he had he had a student whose husband is doing theology, and he wanted somebody to assist him, and he just thought about me. And I laughed in my head at me, theology. I don't know anything about theology. I just know ministry, how to save lives and how to save souls and establish them and
mm,
preach the gospel to them by theology. But anyway, so to cut a long story short, I met the lady, and the lady introduced me to her husband. And lo and behold, I won't mention the name, but he was a minister of state. He
mhm,
was the minister of the then government. And he was pursuing a course in theology, but due to his busy schedules, he needed somebody to assist him with the course. So I remember I would go and see the gentleman. He would give me all the books, big, 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 big books from UNISA, and I have to study all night. I learned a lot, actually. I believe God used that window to also educate me to having some insight into these academic things.
yeah,
So I would study all night, all night. You see, my lights never went off. Study all night. Somebody may think I was praying there. No, I will study all these books, so many models. And then in the evening, I'll come back to town and teach this man. Every day I was teaching him and he was writing the papers. And my aim was for him to pass. I remember when I was going to get married, this man really blessed me. He gave me quite some good money at the time to support with my wedding. And he was a pastor as well. So he would invite me to his church and I'd minister. And through him, I got to meet Bishop Nash of blessed memory,
yeah,
whom God used tremendously to open big doors for me, help me with my papers. I mean, I found favor in his sight. He didn't know me from anywhere. He never met me before, but he just loved me. I remember there was a time that when I first decided not to renew my permit, he went there himself with me, spoke to the chief immigration officer, and helped me. So even at Home Affairs, a lot of people thought that I was a pastor under him.
mm,
That God used Bishop Nash tremendously to open up a lot of doors for me. When we built our first cathedral in Manzini, I remember the neighbors had a lot of issues with us. Of course, I'm sure we're making too much noise.
Mm.
They would rise up. There was a lot of, issues, but Bishop Nash would always come in and speak for me and help the church. And it was like a father in the land. Anytime I had any issues, I would go to his house. I was always welcome in his house. Everybody knew me as Bishop Nash. And anywhere he would see me, he would say, Andy, come here, Andy.
Wow.
I would go and visit him time and again with my wife. And he would always ask, where is your wife? And so we would always go together. And these were the key ministry people that I believe God used to open other doors for me later on in life. Then I got to meet all the other senior pastors and ministers in the land. But I think as we look at the timeline, the early years, these were, if I left anybody out, probably it would be Pastor Pumlani, who was the pastor of my uncle and wife in Assemblies of God at the time. He's Pumlani Matebula. I think he's now the pastor of Assemblies of God in Begelweni at the time, because in the Manzini Church, it was then called Manzini City Church. And he also was a good friend, I'll say, quite a good friend. He had his own struggling issues in the church at the time, because the church eventually closed down. But I must say that he really helped me in terms of friendship, in terms of, somebody you could talk to, and somebody that was in the land, a local, and he could also, encourage you at the time. So yes, I think to mention these few
Yeah.
names, yeah.
Bishop, before, because we wind up, I just want you to quickly, probably in a minute or two, to take me through the meeting places that you use. Like, where was your first meeting place in Manzini? You can just take me through that briefly. And lastly, I would like you to just tell us, like, how do you feel as we talk about this, reminiscing on all these events? I think if this could be what you could say as we come to the close of this edition.
Right. Thank you, Apostle. So my first meeting place was at a place called Imzinene Tutorial Academy. It was more like a remedial school,
Mhm.
way at the back of Manzini, way past the now George Hotel, way back. It was opposite the, at the time, Christian Media Center, which I think is still there. Christian Media Center, or the Swaziland Conference of Churches now, Iswatini Conference of Churches, right opposite where the Indians sell cars now. It
Mhm.
used to be a school, a private school, and that's where I got a little classroom, and that's where we found and we met. After being there for 2 months, we moved the church to the Enterprise building right at the hub of Manzini, next to the bus ramp. Enterprise, where Power Factory Shop is below. There were upstairs.
Oh, yes,
There
yes.
were colleges there called Workers' College, run by a Zimbabwean man called Mr. Black. I'm sure he's still around town. He had a college there, and he gave me one of the classrooms to use. So we moved there in our third month. And then within the same building, the same floor, when I think after about a year or so, or close to a year, when our numbers began to do well, we moved out of that classroom into a bigger classroom, but in the same property, on the same floor. But this time it was in a school called Alpha Business College, run by a Ugandan man, Mr. I've forgotten his name, but I remember him very well. He gave us the place to use for free. He never charged us anything. We're there for about 2 years. He never charged a cent. He just
Mm.
said we should use the place to serve God. Uh, the man is not called Bukasa, but Mukasa. He was Mukasa, Mr. Mukasa. Yes, I can't forget him. And God bless him. He really helped us. He really helped us. So that was our third meeting place. And then when we hit between 70 and 90, we were not fitted into any of the classrooms there again, or halls again. So we looked for, somebody told us that there was a shop that was being advertised for occupation on the just above the bus rank on your way to Manzini Central. It's called Hillview on the left, yes, around Wood Masters, but
Masters,
just
yeah.
on your, yeah.
Mhm.
So just on that highway that goes up to
Mm.
Manzini Central, there was a shop on the left. Yeah, opposite where Mr. Zwali has his flats.
Mm.
We got a shop there. It was a double shop, and we converted it into a church, and we moved. It was at that time that the church really moved into prominence. The whole stretch would be packed with cars. At that time, I mean, that's when we crossed 120 in number on a Sunday. It was packed with people Sunday after Sunday, and Fridays we do run all night programs.
Which year
It
was that,
was,
Bishop?
and this is the year 2003.
Oh, all right. All right.
Yes, to 2003. And that year was very phenomenal because I remember during that year, Bishop Dark sent series of visitors from
Mm.
the church in Ghana, and even some of them even came from America to come and visit us on the mission field. And that was quite encouraging, you know.
Wow.
So we were there 2003. And then, but we had some problems there just in past. I didn't know that it was illegal to run a church in a shop, you know. So city council came after us and they asked us to close down. So we closed down the church. We didn't know what to do, but we moved to Greater Alpha Restaurant at the time. They had a conference room and we would use there on Sundays. They had a service there, but we would go in earlier and run a service until Bishop Nash again came to my aid and helped me to get Manzini Central School Hall, which at the time was his meeting place. And when he built his cathedral and he moved out, so many churches wanted Manzini Central School, but he held my hands and took me to Mr. Bennett, the then principal of the school, and vouched for me. And I stayed there. We were in that school, that large hall. I think it's probably the largest hall in Manzini. We
Yeah.
stayed there until we found our plot and started building. We only moved out of Manzini Central when we,
Oh,
we when we finished first and foremost the basement of our building. And then later on we did the superstructure and came up. But we were there from 2004 till 2009 when we moved into our own building.
oh, this is great. I'm sorry I have to cut you, Bishop. Now, can you just again in a minute, how does this conversation that we are having, how does it make you feel as we are reminiscing on these events, talking about
Oh,
them now? Yes.
oh yes. It's quite an interesting feeling, Apostle. Maybe the feeling is in two dimensions. Number one is that honestly, it's just brought back very good memories to me, real memories that today I look back and I wonder sometimes, how did I do all this or how did all this happen? But the second feeling is a feeling of rejuvenation. As we speak now, I'm over 50 and I started doing this work at 26. And as I recount all these, my strength is being renewed. I feel like I'm just starting. I feel like the things that I did um, 25, 26 years ago, I can still do them. I feel like it's the same person, it's the same God, it's the same grace, and if I can shift on to the same faith, I can still accomplish a lot. Yes, there are so many things that by virtue of life, because I now have a family, age, and everything. At that time, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have children. I was just full of energy and strength and grace and whatever for the Lord. But as I recount all these things, I just feel rejuvenated. I feel like I can still accomplish new things. I feel that, yeah, there is enough strength and energy for greater things for the Lord. And it's a nice feeling.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Bishop. And it's a great pleasure talking with you. And I'm so much inspired. And I look forward to draw so much more inspiration as we talk about this in our next episode. Otherwise, thank you so much for making time to be with us on Transform Life Radio.
Thank you very much, Apostle Chikanda. It has been a pleasure speaking with you this afternoon. Thank you. God bless you.